I'm Nick Whalen here for RotoWire. We move on to week 12 of the NFL season. We got 5 bold predictions coming your way for the week ahead. Number 1, we're going out to Seattle. My guy, Jaxon Smith-Njigba. We're going to say he keeps it up. He continues this hot streak. He finishes the week as a top 5 fantasy wide receiver, something he's only done once this season. Smith-Njigba is coming off of 2 monster weeks back-to-back in divisional games against the Rams and the Niners. 37 fantasy points against LA, 21.8 PPR points last week in a huge win over San Francisco. He's second in the NFL in team target share over the last 5 weeks, north of 30%. Of course, most of those games came without DK Metcalf, but JSN still had a 36% target share last week with Metcalf back in the lineup. He's up to 12th in the NFL in total receiving yards, 7th in catches. He's top 10 in yards after the catch on the year. It took a little bit. It was a bit of a slow start, but we're starting to see him come into his own as one of the best young receivers in the NFL. Seattle now has a massive divisional game. They're third in a row against the Cardinals this week. Arizona certainly improved on defense. They've become a much better unit than they were earlier in the season. But you look at the last 2 games. Yeah, the defense played well, but they played the Bears at their absolute lowest point, and they played the New York Jets, who continue to show us week to week that they are a disaster. This is going to be a huge step up in terms of explosiveness, in terms of overall offensive competency with this Seattle team, even if Geno Smith is still good for at least 1 or 2 just bizarre, chaotic turnovers every single week. Either way, Seattle usually ends up in these passing scripts, high-scoring games. Geno's averaging over 37 passing attempts per game on the year. I think that volume continues. I think it could be another double-digit target game for JSN. Cardinals defense does struggle to generate pressure. They allow nearly a 70% completion rate to opposing quarterbacks. Jaxon Smith-Njigba, he tops 100 yards for the second straight week. He finds the end zone. He finishes as a top 5 fantasy receiver in week 12. All right, for our next prediction, we're going to a game with a double-digit spread. We're going to say the Kansas City Chiefs not only blow out the Panthers, they're going to cover here, but we're going to say they shut out the Panthers and give us our first shutout of the season in the NFL. All right, so taking the Chiefs to put the smackdown on the Panthers. Not exactly a bold take. They're double-digit favorites. They should be able to take care of business here. But again, we'll take it a step further. We'll say the KC defense pitches a shutout. We've not had a shutout in the NFL all year. We had 8 a year ago. So that means we are way overdue here. I think this is the week. This is the game that it happens. Chiefs are coming off of a loss. They need to keep winning to stay in pole position for the number 1 seed in the AFC. You got Buffalo just a game behind with the tiebreaker. The Steelers are sitting at 8-2. I don't see this as a letdown spot. If anything, maybe it's a take out our frustrations spot against a Panthers team that has gained back some respect over the last couple of weeks, but in my opinion is still the least talented team in the NFL. Not really sure I put a whole lot of stock into wins over the Saints or certainly not the New York Giants right now. Either way, the KC defense is going to get after Bryce Young. They're going to bring blitzes. They generate a ton of pressure either way. They're great against the run. We'll see if the KC offense can finally have an explosive game, but I think this is a spot where the Chiefs dominate defensively on Sunday. They pitch a shutout in Carolina, the first shutout in the league this season. For a third bold prediction, we're going to the Lions-Colts game, and we're going to say Anthony Richardson turns back into early season Anthony Richardson. He turns it over at least twice. The Lions win this game by at least 2 scores. Very interesting game in Indy this week. Colts come in with some momentum after beating the Jets last week. Anthony Richardson, I thought, played the best game of his NFL career by a pretty good margin. He was really impressive. Other than the sack fumble that put the Jets ahead early in the third quarter, he looked composed. He made some difficult throws. He was accurate downfield. He hit his usual array of big plays to Josh Downs and A.D. Mitchell and Alec Pierce. He had 2 rushing touchdowns, including the game winner. It was a great, great performance, but we need to remember one important thing. It was the New York Jets. This is not only a terrible offense that has failed to top 300 yards now in 3 straight games, but I think it's just a straight up bad defense. I think we need to call a spade here. They're coasting on reputation from last season. This is a team that can't stop the run. They're below league average against the pass. The production from their premier guys just has not been there this season. So I would love to see Anthony Richardson have another huge game and continue to progress. I don't know if this is the spot where it happens. This Detroit team obviously rolling at a completely different level from every other team in the league right now. I know they lost Alex Anzalone last week in that win over Jacksonville. Maybe that's big long-term. I don't think it really kills them in this spot. I think the Lions come out hot. They're on the road, but it's another indoor game. Should be comfortable. Colts are going to be playing from behind. Richardson going to be pressing in the second half. Anthony Richardson, he turns it over at least twice. The Lions win this game by a minimum of 10 points. Our next bold prediction, Mike Evans back in the lineup this week. We'll say he returns with a vengeance. The Bucs win this game and begin their quest to win the NFC South. So all signs point to Mike Evans getting back on the field this weekend for the Bucs. They have not won a game since Mike Evans went out in week 7 against Baltimore, 4 straight losses, including that Ravens game. But they've competed in all these games without Chris Godwin as well. I mean, you're down easily your 2 best weapons in this offense. Baker Mayfield and that improved running game, they continue to keep them in these tight games against really good teams. They had to play KC and San Francisco the last 2 weeks. So with Mike Evans back, going up against a Giants team that is just giving up on its season at this point, I think that's pretty obvious. They're rolling out Tommy DeVito. The players don't want it, but the Giants have their reasons. We'll leave it at that. I think Mayfield will be elated to have his favorite target back. Mike Evans has a huge game. He finds the end zone. He nears 100 yards on Sunday. And here's the second part of the prediction. The Buccaneers win this game, and they begin their march toward not only hanging around in the NFC playoff picture, but they win the NFC South. Now, the Atlanta Falcons had a golden opportunity to run away with this division over the last few weeks. They dropped 2 in a row to New Orleans and Denver heading into their Week 12 bye. That means the door is still cracked open for this Buccaneers team. And I know it's going to be tough. They've lost to Atlanta twice straight up already, so they won't have a tiebreaker. But who in the world trusts the Atlanta Falcons right now? And the Falcons still have to play Minnesota. They have to play Washington. They have to play the LA Chargers. Those are all very losable games. Meanwhile, the Buccaneers have the second easiest remaining schedule in the NFL. The Chargers are the only team with a winning record left on the Buccaneers schedule. Beyond the DeVito Giants this week, they still get Carolina twice. They get the Saints again. They get this dead Cowboys team, and they get the Las Vegas Raiders. So Mike Evans goes off in his return. The Bucs get the win. They begin their march toward chasing down the Falcons and ultimately winning the NFC South. All right, we'll finish out with a little bit of a niche tight end prediction here. Will Dissly of the LA Chargers, the waiver wire hero in Week 11, I think he does it again. He finishes Week 12 not as a top 8 fantasy tight end as he did last week, as a top 5 fantasy tight end this week. So Dissly almost got there this past week. Put up 18 PPR points, caught a touchdown, one of the better tight end performances that we saw. I absolutely love Will Dissly. Started the season kind of in a lesser role. Chargers trying to figure out this receiving core. I think Justin Herbert has found a lot of trust in Will Dissly. I think he builds on that performance last week and in what could be another shootout this week against the Baltimore Ravens. High total in that game. Over the last 5, Dissly's commanding a 23% target share. That's in borderline elite territory among tight ends. He's caught 24 of 33 targets in that span. He's been targeted at least 6 times in 4 of those games. Chargers do have a couple decent emerging wide receiver options in Ladd McConkey and Quentin Johnston, but there's no true target hog in that group. There's no guy who's going to get, 9 to 15 targets every single week. They spread the ball around, and we're seeing more and more of Will Dissly. And keep in mind the matchup here. Not only has Baltimore's secondary been torched many times this season, but they've really struggled against tight ends in particular. No team has given up more catches or targets to tight ends this season. They're second only to Kansas City in terms of yards given up to the position. Baltimore has only given up 2 touchdowns to tight ends, so that's not exactly working in our favor, but I think that could change this week. And again, we have major shootout potential here. Totals north of 50 right now. Chargers proved last week that they could play in that kind of game script. They're typically a team that likes to win games like 22-17, but hey, if they have to play in the 30s, we now know they can do it. I think we see another big game from Will Dissly. And look, we got 6 teams on bye this week. So Kyle Pitts, Dalton Kincaid, Taysom Hill, Evan Ingram, all those guys not in the mix this week. We'll say Will Dissly finishes Week 12 as a top 5 fantasy tight end.